Hi, welcome to this DCP web tutorial. In today's tutorial we'll be using Blender 2.8 to create the second version of this sci-fi animation loop. So if we go into here and click repeat, we'll see that we've got this sort of corridor, long corridor, the camera's flying through it and you've got all this lighting going on, and this will be a seamless loop. So if you put this into like some sort of video editing software, you can just stack them side by side and it will loop seamlessly. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's create something similar. Let's try and aim to do something a little bit better. So we open up Blender. Let's click on General. We'll click on the cube and delete it. So click it and then hit the delete key. Click on the light source and hit the delete key. Let's go to File, Save As, and I've got a folder here. I've already given it a temporary file name. Just call it Sci-Fi Animation Loop and then put -01 at the end. So we're going to save different versions. We'll right click and pan around here. Middle mouse click to pan around to this direction. So you've got the X and Y like this. We'll press Shift A and we want to insert a cylinder. So we have a cylinder here and we want to set the number of vertices to 3. That turns it into a triangle. And then we want to set the cap fill to nothing. So now it's a hollow triangle like this sort of shape. And we want to rotate it on the x-axis first. So we want to rotate it 90 degrees. Now it's laying down flat. And then on the z-axis 90 degrees. Now it's rolling, or it's facing this direction, so we can see it like this, right? Like a tunnel. So left mouse click and that will confirm everything here. And we want to press number 7. Just press number 7 on our keyboard. That takes us into the top orthographic. And what we want to try and do now, let's just see. Let's have a look here. What we want to do is set the z-axis to 4. We want to set it to 4 like this. Let's just have a look here. Yeah, that should be fine. And then let's press number 7 and get our camera into the right view. So let's click on the camera and we want to set all of these values here to 0. So we just want to center it out basically, right? So just set them all to 0. Turn on the wireframe. You can see the camera here. Let's just pan across a little bit, and then we want to set the x to minus. Let's see, the x location. What am I doing wrong here? It should be up and down. Yeah, we want to set this to -4. -4. So we set the x location to -4. That puts it right on the edge of this this triangle, right at the beginning here. Then we want to rotate it around, so we want to rotate it first on the z-axis -90, so z -90, and then we want to rotate it on the y 90 degrees. So now the camera is facing and looking through this tunnel, right? You can just check the settings here for the camera, so we can see the camera is going to be looking. So if we press 0, we'll see the camera is inside of this triangle, looking down through the triangle. Okay, let's middle mouse click and rotate out. Let's zoom out a little bit and press Ctrl S to save, then go to File, Save As, click the plus button to turn it to 02 and then click Save. Then go to Shading, then go to the World Settings, and we need to add in our HDRI map. So let's just do what we normally do. Let's zoom in here a little bit for you. We'll rotate around a little bit here. Then we'll press Shift A. And we want to import a, where are we? Texture coordinate. We need environmental texture, and then we need a vector mapping. So just click generated to vector, vector to vector here, and then color to surface. And then you can click on the render view. It's going to go all crazy color. Don't worry about that. Let's open up our web browser, and then we'll go to HDRI Haven. And we'll minimize this, open the folder on my desktop. Let's just open this up, and then we want to create a folder, call it HDRI, and then click Browse all 2000. I'm going to download the usual one I use, nighttime. Let's put some notes here. So I'll put the links to these HDRI maps in the YouTube description, so you can download the same ones. So we'll download this one, 4K, and we'll go back and we'll look at this navigation here, and maybe we'll go for something like let's look at skies, see what's in here. Let's click this one here and we'll download that one. You can download as many of these as you like and experiment with them. So I'll put a link to this one as well in the YouTube description. These are the two that I'm going to experiment with, and you can download more and experiment with more of them. So, right, so let's drag that into here. So we've got the two maps here. Close the browser, close the folder. We'll go back into Blender. We'll click open here. So let's just do that one more time. So we've got our HDRI set up here with the world settings, and we'll click open here. Then go to the HDRI folder. I'm going to click on this Satara Night here and then click open. Then we can see that in the scene here. And next thing we want to do is go back to layout, and let's just see, let's just make sure we do this right. So okay, so let's click on the solid view. So click solid view, and then we'll go to the modifier. So let's click on the cylinder here, cylinder. Let's label this cylinder inside, because we're going to have one outside as well. So let's call it cylinder inside. Click on it, go to the modifier, add a modifier, and we want to add a where are we? Let's see, wireframe, and then we want to increase the thickness of this wireframe. So we want to set this to something like 0.2. It's quite a thick wireframe like this. Something like this should be good. And then let's just see, let's have a little experiment. Let's try and do a surface subdivide. Let's have a look. Maybe we can make something a bit more interesting today. I don't think this is going to work too well though. In fact, we won't do that. We'll get rid of the subdivide for now. We'll just stick with the wireframe like this, and this should be fine. So let's see. Okay, let's zoom out a little bit, and really what we want to do, we could have actually duplicated that triangle, but let's do it this way. So what we'll do is press Shift A and insert another cylinder. And you can see the cylinder's already set up with the right settings and everything as it was previously. It's kind of helping us a little bit. So let's just left click here, then click on that second cylinder. This one here is actually called cylinder. Call it cylinder outside. So give it the correct name. Then click on the object data. So it's data, and we want to rotate this, right? So we want to rotate it first on the, let's see, on the x-axis 90 degrees. So that's laying down flat. We want to rotate it on the z-axis 90 degrees as well. So now it's in the same direction facing as the one inside, but we want this one outside, right? So to make it outside, we need to scale it up to 1.5, and then scale it on the y to 1.5, and then scale it on the z-axis to 4. So it's matching. Now there's like one inside and one outside. Maybe we'll set this to 2 this time. So let's set what have I done here? 2. So let's set the x and the y scale to 2, and then the z to 4. So it's kind of like covering over like this here. Okay, so let's go back into wireframe and click on the inside cylinder. We can zoom out here a little bit, and then go to the modifier, and then click add modifier, and we want to do an array modifier. This is very similar to the last tutorial we did when we did this work, and we want to set the relative here, the x to 0, and then we want to set this z to 1. Set this to 1, set this to 0, and then set the count to 30. So we're just repeating this object all the way down, all the way, and it's going to be quite long like this, right? Then we'll click on the outside cylinder and just repeat it. So add modifier, array, and then we'll set this to 0. We'll set this to 1. So it's exactly 1 across. And then we want to set that to 30 as well. So it's just repeating what the other one did. So we can see that they're just going to be this continuous line. Let's press 0 on our keyboard. 0 takes us into the camera view, and we will click on solid view for now, so we can see the solid view. Let's go to the camera. Let's go to the camera settings, and we want to widen this out a little bit, something like 22 should be good, 22 mil. And then the end length, let's just set that to like around 300. We want to see it's quite far into the distance, right? So we'll see how this works out. We can modify this if it's not quite right, but we'll see. I think this should be fine. Now we need to give these things materials first. So let's see. So let's click on render. Let's turn on the screen space reflections. We'll expand this, turn on refraction, turn off half trace, and then the precision we're going to set it to about 0.16, something like this, and then the roughness we'll set it to around 0.1, and then the edge fading we're going to put that all the way to the top, something like this. We can experiment with this. Let's set the render and the viewport to 120, press Ctrl S to save it. Then we'll go to what we need to do next. We need to give it a material, right? So let's click on the cylinder here, the inside one. Let's go to our render view. So click render view, and then let's go to the material. And what I normally do is just double click here, press Ctrl C to copy that name, then go to the material, click new, and then click here and paste that name, so the material and the object have the same name. That just makes life a little bit easier later. And then let's see what we want to do with this inside one. We want to set the metallic all the way up, and we want to bring the roughness down to around 2.55, something like this, 2.55, and then we want to turn on screen space reflections, go to file, save as, let's save it as version 3, save. So we'll turn on screen space refractions, and then we'll set it to multiply like this. Okay, now we need to sort out the outside one, right? The material for that one. So let's go to the outside cylinder, and let's go to the material. So let's copy this name, outside. Let's select that, Control C to copy, go to the material. Let's click on it, then go to material, then go new, and paste that name. It's got the same name. Let's set it to a black color, and then let's see what we want to do. We want to we just want to bring down this roughness a bit, right? We'll set it to about 0.19, something quite close to that. I think pretty much everything else we can leave alone. So if we click on the camera and go to the settings here, if we were to move the camera forward, you can see how it's going to move through these segments like this, right? So we should set this back to -4. Let's go to file, save, and then we can go to our shading and in the top here press 0, and then we can rotate our shading around to get different lighting, get different effects. Can really experiment with this now. And I think maybe what we'll do is go to the inside cylinder. Let's set the rotation on the Z back to 0. Let's go to the modifier, and let's see, let's try and increase the thickness. We should really turn off the overlays. That kind of helps us to see what's going on. So maybe let's try and set it to like 0.3. So we increase the thickness of this wireframe. So let's go back to the camera, and as we move through now, we should get a slightly different effect here. So let's set this back to -4. That brings us right to the edge of that scene. I think we'll leave the cylinder at 0.3. So it's up to you. You can experiment with this. That's just going to be like the thickness of these black lines, right? You can see these lines here, here, and here, and the 3 of them. So the thicker this is, the more prominent those will be. You could even set it crazy like this, right? But it doesn't look like a tunnel anymore. So we're going to set it to about 0.3 here. I think there's a good setting. Then we can go to our HDRI map again, and we can pick the other one, Shanghai, and click open. And now we've got a completely different style here, right? And then we can rotate this one around, we can get other colors, and we can do all some good stuff here. So look, I think I like the colors in this map better, but you can experiment with between them two maps. And now really what we've got to try and do is animate this across the sequence and see what it looks like. So let's set the Z here to 0 first. Let's go to the layout. Let's press number 7. Number 7 takes us into the top view, and we want to look at it in wireframe. So let's click on the camera. So we see the camera here. And what we want to try and work out is how far do we want to move it, or move the camera along this, let's say along this path here. We have to move it to the correct position as well, which is quite important. So we can say we'll move it, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Let's aim to move it 8 of these segments. So let's hit the record button, and we'll go to the camera, click on the object data, and then hover over this location here and press the letter I. That will insert a keyframe down here. We'll go to the very last frame, 240, and we'll press the letter I again. That will also insert a keyframe. Then we'll click on the move tool, and the camera is here. We're going to click on this red arrow, and we'll hold down the control key. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So at the end here, we should end up on 60 here. So that would be exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 segments, right? Then if we untick the record button, and normally what I do is go back 1 frame. So go to frame 239, then copy this value here. Copy it, Control C to copy on frame 239, then go back, then go forwards to frame 240, hit the record button, click here and paste in that value like that. Okay, so we should now be able to go into our render view and then press 0, and then untick the record button and go back to the first frame and click play, and now we'll be flowing through this tunnel like this. So let's go back to the first frame and we can do a few things here. So let's see what we might do. We want this to loop seamlessly, so we have to be a little bit careful here. So let's have a little think. Let's hit the record button. If we went into the shading and hit the shading view here. Okay, so what we're going to do is we'll make sure in the layout we've got the record button on. We'll go to the shading here, and then on this Z axis here we're going to press the letter I. Then we'll go back to the layout and we'll go to the very end frame on 240, go back to the shading and press the letter I here as well. Let's go back to the layout and we want to go to frame 120. That's like the midpoint, right? Press the letter I here and say insert all channels. So we've got a new keyframe here. Go to the shading, here and press the letter I here and set this to 111 degrees. Then one thing we need to do, let's see. So really on this end frame, we want to go to the shading and set it to 1 degree. Set it to 1. Then we should get a pretty decent loop out of it. Let's see. It's going to change colors, but as it rotates back around, we should get this sort of similar color where it bounces from one frame to the next. So it should be pretty seamless. It should look pretty good. Okay, so let's hit that record button. Let's pause it. Let's just check what it looks like. You can see all the colors in here. This is now your time to go and experiment. You can do all sorts of stuff now with this video sequence. You can play around with the settings inside the modifier. You can go to the material. You can click on the this cylinder here inside. You can click on the color, change its color. You can get different effects. So you can go and experiment and play around with the settings just to see how you can improve it or change it. You can turn off the metallic. You can turn that right up. You can change the specular. You can play around with the roughness, right? You can get different like effects here. You can get like remember, like these are all buildings and stuff, right? So it's really for you to go and experiment, play around with the settings and see what works for you. So I'm going to leave it roughly like this. I'm going to go to File, Save. I'll go to the output here. I'll go to PNG and change it to AVI JPEG. I'll click on this folder here. Let's go to my desktop. We'll go into this animation sequence here. This is where we're doing our work. We'll click Accept and I'll press Ctrl F12 to render this out. So this will take a little bit of time to render. So while it's rendering, I'm going to pause it and we'll come back and check the video. Okay, so Blender's finished rendering out all the 240 frames. So we'll close this. Let's just open up Blender. Let's go to File, Save, and close down Blender. Now normally I'll just open up the video and show it to you. So let's just do that anyway. Let's have a look here. So here we can see the video looping. Well, we'll set it to loop. Let's set it to loop. So it looks pretty well. And I'm going to be making a few more tutorials like this. Probably next I'm going to focus on maybe some of the other modifiers, or we'll experiment with some of these other tools. If this is moving too fast, you've got one of two options. So if you think this is too fast, because if you look at the original one I did, it was moving much slower, right? But this was, let's see. I think in this example, I moved the camera less of a distance, or there was more frames, one or the other. But all I would do, if I wanted to make this animation move slower, you can either slow down the frame rate, so run it at 30 frames a second. So then the duration will be twice as long. It will be 4 seconds, not 3. Or you can just make the number of frames more, right? So you can run it at 60 frames a second, but just increase the number of frames. So I think in the original one, if we check carefully, it was 4 seconds duration. Here 4 seconds, and in this new one that we just made today, it was set at 3 seconds. So if I want to make this one move slower, all I would do is open up Blender. We'll click on that. Let's go to File, Open Recent. I think let's go to Open. So to fix that, I'll increase the frames here. So I'll still run at 60 frames, but if I put another 60 seconds here and made it 300, I would have all these extra frames, right? And that extra set of frames would make it 1 second more duration, but I'll have to move all my keyframes as well, really just for the camera. So we click on the camera, you'll grab this keyframe and drag it to the end here, and then you'll drag this keyframe across to 150. So now it will be 150 will be your midpoint. So we're to play this in the viewport here now. We can see it's moving a bit slower now. So the more frames, the slower it's going to move, basically, right? That's all it is. Nice and simple. So you can go and experiment with that. Play around with the settings. Try different HDRI maps. You can even do stuff like go to the inside cylinder, go to the modifier, and you could go and apply another wireframe, so 2 wireframes. So you click on wireframe again, and now you've got like this double lined wireframe, right? And that one will sit at the bottom of the stack, so you can increase its thickness. You can get all these different shapes, sizes. You can experiment with it. It's very flexible, right? So you can just really experiment and see what looks good. So now you've got like a different animation, and it's got all these stacked layers that you're walking, like flying through these triangles. You can really experiment with this. You can experiment with this top thickness as well. You can really change a lot of the animation here just by modifying these settings and experimenting with them. So I'll leave you to go and experiment, try and make something nice. Maybe you can use it in an intro, use it on some of your videos, but I think this came out pretty well, this example. So I won't be saving this update here. I'll just close it. That's the end of this tutorial, and I look forward to seeing you in the next DCP web tutorial.